Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to episode 2 of the Believers Early Careers podcast. This is your brother, Rahul Ali, the Elite Man, and your host. So in today's episode, we speak to Mohammed Faris, who is the author of the Productive Muslim book and the CEO of the Productive Muslim company. And the work he does, is amazing in terms of how he's connecting spirituality to productivity and really changing the way we view things like our careers from a Barakah lens, which I think is really, really, honestly, really important. And, I would really encourage afterwards to check out his work on productivemuslim.com and look at stuff like the Barakah Manifesto, the prophetic life balance, the routine, and he really goes into how the Prophet ﷺ done, his day-to-day life and his routine and stuff like that, and how we can really as Muslims tap into barakah, and not just, from our day-to-day practices like salah, but from a wider holistic angle. And this episode is a really important one because it goes into the mindset, and not just any mindset, the barakah mindset, thinking about things from a barakah point of view, from a barakah paradigm. I think personally, we don't tap into that. We don't view, barakah as a wider thing that can relate to things like our careers and our work. So this episode really kind of goes into that, and we talk about barakah culture versus hustle culture. We talk about productivity tips. We talk about how to tap into the early hours in the morning after Fajr to really dip into that barakah and use that advantage that we have that we just really sleep on. We also go into a lot of background about Mohammed Faris' sort of life, his career story, and how it led to the Productive Muslim, journey being started and that career. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of, I think, gems and lessons to learn just from hearing from someone like Mohammed Faris and the work he does. Also, separately, I've written on the back of this a blog where I've tried my own routine in the summer to, try to embed in barakah where I can and really use the early hours in the morning after Fajr. And this has been inspired by the Productive Muslim work. So if that might be of interest to you in terms of how to apply it practically and the challenges with that, then, feel free to check out my blog on the believersearlycareers.com blog section. So you can find out more about that. So yeah, I hope you guys, really enjoyed this episode. And I also want to add that this was recorded shortly after Ramadan and, during the kind of height of the Black Lives Matter protest. And the reason why I kept that in there was because I think now there's not as much media attention there. We've kind of forgotten about it. And I think it's just a reminder that, with everything that's going on in the world with Black Lives Matter and more, just because it's not being spoken about, on the media, on social media, doesn't necessarily mean we should forget about it that easily. We should always be thinking about how we can, do what we can to make things better. So I'll leave that here. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please do let me know how you find it. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and share your thoughts and reflections to really support the work. Enjoy. Assalamu alaikum, Mohammed. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Kato, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. Now, Jazakallah for joining. It's quite a surreal moment for me, I think, because a few years back I was reading a book, The Productive Muslim. I was in a strange place in my career and I didn't really know, what I wanted to do, and I didn't really know how to approach the next steps. And I read your book and I really liked the concept in terms of how you really embedded spirituality to productivity and even how we view things generally, like in terms of our day-to-day jobs and, whatnot. And I think that really struck me. And I think it helped me to an extent that it planted the seeds. And as I kind of grew along and went along, I started picking up other stuff. And then, here I am in this trajectory. Like maybe a few years later, I'm on a call to you talking about stuff like early careers and how we can embed, productivity there. So, alhamdulillah, how things work. And I think part of what you're going to talk about will really kind of hone in the points about, the importance of that tawakkul, the importance of Barakah and thinking about careers from that kind of perspective. But I guess before we start, what do you currently do?
Sure. So I run the productive company full time, and as well as Barakah Academy. These are a training coaching company that connects spirituality to personal development, professional development, and spirituality. So we do courses, we do coaching, we do retreats. We also work with organizations to basically share this material into company settings as well. So it's been about 13 years since we started, and 7 years doing this full time.
Wow.
Sorry, 5 years doing this. 5 years doing this full time. Almost lost track of time there.
What does a typical work day or work week look like for you?
Yes, it's pretty a lot of time in the mornings. So it's more spent on writing. So it's a recent reading and writing. That's where my focus is on. And then early part of the day, I would focus on anything to do with content creation, trying to think about any sort of trying to promote some of our upcoming programs. And in the afternoon, a lot of it is coaching calls and webinars and dealing with sort of clients who want more one-to-one attention or group attention. So that's been my typical sort of weekday. Fridays is normally my day that I can spend more time reflecting, and as well as also looking back from an admin perspective on the how management of the company. I only work 6 days a week because of when you run your own business, you just kind of have no choice but to work 6 days a week, unfortunately. Sundays is a day off and just chill out. And the only reason I chose Sundays because everyone else is off that day. That's the only alignment I had to do. Otherwise, I would have chosen Friday as my day off. But anyway, that's how it worked out.
Nah, mashallah, sounds like a very busy schedule. Also, how are things currently in is it Texas, Dallas?
Yes, Dallas, Texas. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been 5 years since I moved to Dallas.
Yeah, and how's it kind of been? I guess COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter protests. How has it been on your side? How are things there?
Yeah, I was reflecting that a few weeks, yesterday actually, the team meeting. I was saying that subhanAllah, because of the nature of my work, work has always been A, home-based, and B, it's kind of like insulated from the rest of society. So something I felt like part of me realized, and I'm part of I feel guilty about this, but the fact that I'm not really engaged with society around me. I'm always online and traveling and doing workshops, and I've not really sort of gone out and understood some of the injustices happening around me. So this was an interesting wake up call. I think for me, part of the transition to COVID, number one, because I'm not traveling as much, kind of maybe focus more inwards, and also do a lot more reading, a lot more sort of introspection, and trying to think about things through. And also because with the protests, started reading more about just the history, the racial history in the U.S. and outside the U.S. and just trying to understand things from Muslim perspective and yeah, putting things together. So it's been an interesting time for introspection and reflection.
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot of things there, and I think partly yes, it's definitely a wake up call. But I think there's also that thing where there's a lot of, I guess, noise, and there's a lot of things you see in the media. There's a lot of things you see on social media. And I think a lot of young people are seeing that they can kind of get caught up and perhaps feel a bit helpless, feel a bit, what can I actually, do to help? And I guess there are some things, of course, but I think it's important that a point to remember is to really focus on your area of influence and, try to change things where you can. Because if you get caught up in like the big structural challenges, then, it's going to be it's going to be quite stressing, I think, and you're going to invite kind of a lot of that stress. But continuing.
Yeah.
I want to get into how did it all start for you? Now let's go back to uni times because you went to the UK.
Yes, I was in Bristol. I was a Bristolian. So I studied in Bristol, did my bachelor's and master's, did finance and economics and investment. And I was thinking that university, I wasn't so much for the degree, but I really enjoyed the extracurricular stuff, right? And I somehow was roped into the ISOC world early on in my first year. And that just got the ball rolling and just getting involved with the community and serving the community and doing stuff and giving khutbahs and halaqas and doing Islamic awareness weeks and the whole the drill. And then in those early, so around the time I was doing my master's, I was feeling really overwhelmed. I was doing my master's at the time. I was president of the ISOC, and I was like, man, I just feel so busy. And I'm like, how do these like top CEOs, top people at the top of the game, how do they manage like 50,000 employees, or like how do they do that? And I kind of at that time stumbled upon science of productivity, and I thought, this is interesting. Like, there are ways you can hack yourself and kind of hack your brain and get the most out of yourself. And that's when I really fell in love with this whole topic of productivity and started applying my life and realizing, yes, it does make a difference. So initially I started blogging about it. I said, let me just share this stuff with my, with Muslim, first my friends and then people I know, and then eventually on a blog of Productive Muslim. And again, the idea of Productive Muslim, subhanAllah, I remember going to Fajr one day and this two words Productive Muslim just popped in my head. And I was like, oh, I love that. I remember like rushing back after Fajr prayer and just booking the domain name and started blogging about it. But then as I was blogging the first couple of months, I realized something was kind of bothering me. Number one, I was like, did anyone care about this stuff? Like, who cares? Like, come on, it's like, who cares about stuff? And I got caught up and I just shut the website down. I was like, it's a stupid idea. No one's gonna read this. And then 6 months later, after graduating, a 10-year-old boy reached out and said, hey, I used to love your blog. What's up? Where's your blog? And I'm like, wow, I have a true fan. And then secondly, I think that's when it kind of hit me. I started asking the question, if productivity is so important, if it's such a big deal, if it really helps you become a better version of yourself, then where does Islam talk about productivity? I was not really hearing the topic of productivity at all in the sort of Friday khutbahs or massages. I'm not getting that. No one's talking about time management, maybe a little bit here and there, but nothing like concretely. And that's when I started. And I come across the hadith that says, "Burika li ummati fi bukuriha." There's barakah in the early hours of my nation. And the narrator of that hadith, Sakhr ibn Wada'a, said that when he heard that hadith, he started sending his merchandise early in the morning and became very wealthy as a result. I'm like, wait a second. Normally when you hear that hadith, there's barakah, and they're like, okay, there's barakah, you feel good, there's barakah. But this man is actually saw that this is actually a way to be successful in his career, in his trade. And he tapped into that source of barakah, and he became very wealthy as a result. And what is productivity? Then just trying to get, is more output for input, if you want to put it in very simple terms. And that's when I really flipped the script and flipped the question. It's not that I'm trying to teach the Muslim world the productive science I was learning. I realized, let's start from within and look in the Quran, in the Seerah, in the history of Islamic civilization, to understand what is that. How Islam has to offer to the world of productivity, the science of productivity. Some things we agree with, some things we disagree with, and some things we add. So it became an interesting journey that took, that so far has been going on for the past 13 years, alhamdulillah.
And I love that kind of concept where, you're right. There isn't really anything that's kind of been out there in terms of productivity and being a Muslim and, achieving excellence in terms of what you do in the workplace or even in any sort of career or any venture. But it's always been there. Like, if you look at, I guess, I always kind of mention, the Muslim Spain, Baghdad, the way they were being pioneers of the sciences, the way they were pushing it. It wasn't by pure fluke. There must have been a mindset. There must have been a mentality. There must have been a way of thinking that they thought, hang on, I don't get up in the morning or just do what I do just, to earn my piece of bread or earn a few luxuries. I actually do what I do because I want to improve my community. I want to make what I do a form of ibadah. And, I want to push the science. I want to improve the lives of the Muslims. And I think, I love how you find that concept of productivity. And even though it went, maybe that 10-year-old boy that came in was maybe it has a message from Allah to say, pick that up again, think about that again. And then it's like, you start again. And this is where we are. And I've seen some of the stuff which is what I want to get into, and especially some kind of practical stuff that young people can start to embed in. Like, I want to get into that quite soon, but I think there's definitely so much there that we can use. And even from a spiritual perspective, from a mindset perspective, from a practical perspective, there's a lot. But if we go back a bit, so how long were you in the UK?
6 years.
And then where did you move on to?
And after that, I got an early. So after I graduated, I spent a year in the UK. I was actually being like a part-time teacher, Arabic English interpreter, a window cleaner, grocery store. Like, I got involved.
Hustling, grinding.
That's it. And then after that, I got an offer to work for the Islamic Development Bank, which is a multilateral development bank based in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So alhamdulillah, like perfect. I thought, Islamic banking, in Jeddah, 45 minutes from Mecca, Medina, 45 minutes Mecca, like this is like dream job. And I signed up, so I became a quote unquote young professional, and I worked there for 6 years before sort of transition to Barakah to Muslim.
So you've lived in the UK, you lived in Makkah, and then you also moved Jeddah, sorry. Then you also moved to the US.
US, yep. And I was born in Tanzania, so that gives you an idea. Background. So I feel like I always say to people, like, alhamdulillah, I've been blessed to have these multiple experiences in different parts of the world, and I feel very comfortable. Literally, drop me anywhere in the world, I feel very comfortable. Like, drop me in Singapore, Malaysia, and I feel like home. Drop me in Africa, I feel at home. Drop me in the Middle East, I feel at home. Drop me in the UK, US, I feel at home. So alhamdulillah, it's been a blessing to be able to, this was called a third culture kid, I think that's what they call these days. We're able to comfortably, move to different spaces and still feel like I feel ground, I feel home.
That's super interesting, because I think perhaps myself and that might be listening to this, we're just thinking, wow, this has gone from the UK to Jeddah to US, and he's transitioned so easily. And was there any kind of, I guess there must have been, or maybe not, were there any particular challenges that you may face, maybe adjusting to different lifestyles again?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's any culture shock either way. I guess, of course, there's some culture shock that you get, and peculiar things that you're like, okay, this looks weird, this is different, but nothing that completely sort of transforms you, or it is like changed who you are. If anything, every transition has helped me become a better version of myself, because it kind of challenged some of the basic assumptions about people I interact with, about sometimes. Even 5 years ago, told me you're going to move to the US. I'm like, why would I go there? Like, who, like what? And now I love this place. I really enjoy being here. So, the same thing, if you're living in Saudi, like, why would you go to Saudi? Like, it's like every time, or in UK, like, who, like, come on, you deal with the British, like, come on. Like, you have all these notions. And then you go there, you live, you interact, you deal with people, and you're like, all right. So I feel like exposure and meeting people, it opens up your horizons in a way that you never think of before. And of course, it just makes you, it challenges you. And I think as long as you're always introspective, and when you react sort of like, why did you react certain way, and try to understand what's going on, it can be very helpful wherever you are in the world, basically.
I guess that's like one of the kind of blessings of traveling, and well, I guess for you it was literally moving in terms of like changing your whole lifestyle. But I think the kind of concept there of kind of getting out of your comfort zone, being in a new environment, being in a new transitional period, I think stuff like that, whether it's moving places or whether it's doing something different, or kind of doing something, for example, if you're like me a few years back where I kind of stage fright, so I would never want to present, but getting myself out of my comfort zone and doing that, that's where I think growth really lies. And I think traveling is something within that, there's a blessing within that people, whether even if it's a short trip, whatever it is, there are things you can really pick up and learn there. So, anyone listening, if there are kind of, whether it's camping, whether it's traveling, something I would definitely encourage, because you just, I don't know what it is about it, but you really do find yourself, you do find out little things about yourself, and it kind of helps you to establish those values, establish who you are. And that's how we can kind of grow to become the best versions of ourselves, is by essentially finding ourselves and being, who we really are. But
exactly, uncomfortable environments. I mean, just to add to that, I mean, when I was in the UK, I decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Like, just one of those random ideas when you're students, right? Yeah, I'll just do the highest mountain in Africa. I've never climbed mountains in my life. I've never done anything outdoorish, no camping, nothing. Just, yeah, I'll just go climb the highest mountain in Africa. And I feel like that experience, because I remember I should eventually then I moved to Saudi, then from Saudi I actually went. That experience made me realize, okay, if I could do this, what else can I do, right? It just opens up your horizons. And then even recently, I try every year to pick a new habit, pick a new sort of skill that I'm not comfortable with. For example, last year I learned baking, right? I'm the guy who will burn the kitchen down easily, just making fried egg, right? And suddenly I'm here, handling sourdough bread and putting stuff and making pizza for my family. And I felt like, and I remember just going through that process of learning and failing and burning a couple of pizzas and breads. But that was actually part of the process. And I felt like if I don't do that sort of things, I will end up being stagnant. I'll end up not being better version of myself. Now my new skill recently, I started last week because of the lockdown, is jump ropes. So I'm trying to get into not just any jump rope, but learn, do like a do like those like next level jump ropes, Muhammad Ali style jump ropes. So that's my new thing I'm trying to get myself into, and it's fun. It's really just pushes your boundaries and it's makes you, even if it's the lockdown situation, you can still definitely learn new skills.
Yeah, I think that we call that I think skipping. Sounds
Yeah.
yeah. Sounds like that.
And the skipping sounds a little bit not very masculine, right? So jump roping, sounds sounds more manly, right? So is that like skip rope? It's not skip rope, it's a jump rope.
That's a good point, actually. I'm actually pretty good at skipping. I am quite pro at doing the doubles and all that. It's a really good cardio.
Man.
So
Send me some tips. I'm still tripping.
I did a bit of boxing, so I kind of learned the footwork from there. But I think practice, once you get into it and once you start doing the sprints, the doubles, then you really feel it. And it actually really is an amazing cardio. And what you mentioned before about learning to cook, I think that is definitely on my to-do list in terms of new skills to add on down the line. There's a few other things I'm working on right now, but I think that definitely is one to really work on. Because I think part of that is self-sufficiency, not just relying on mum, the wife, constantly. Sometimes it's unfair on them. So I think maybe as men generally, we should perhaps be doing more work in that kind of area. But there are some kind of interesting themes that you mentioned, and some of them were overcoming fears. So you pretty much started Productive Muslim from scratch. I mean, even before you kind of gave up on it and picked it up again. How did you overcome that fear factor, and how was it at the start with Productive Muslim?
The beginning was it was more like my play, right? It was like I'm learning I'm putting stuff out there that I myself was writing for myself, really. I was scratching my own itch, right? Because I was like, where's the linkage? So I was not writing for an audience. I didn't have an audience then. I was not writing for anybody physically. I was like, I'm just like really putting stuff out there. It's when I think that things got picked up and, crossed like 1 million followers on Facebook. We started getting a lot of, people like asked me to do workshops internationally, calling Singapore and different parts of the world, asked me to do workshops. And that's when I reached a point. This is when I was working full time. I was like, okay, there's a phrase that I love that says the dream became bigger than the dreamer. And I was like, oops, I actually cannot shut this thing down. Like I can't just walk away from this. And I'm done. It's a nice experiment. Let me shut it down. And when I realized I cannot shut this down, the question, well, what are you going to do with it? Right? Either you're going to let it, someone else run it. Are you going to, what are you going to do with it? And that's when the decision was made to say, well, is there any way for me to see if I could make a full living out of this? And this was up until 2013. It was a crazy idea. And 2015 is when I made the sort of move. But it was more like, again, like you said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes he sets things up for you and he opens doors for you. And I call it follow the breadcrumbs, right? Don't worry about where you're going to go. Just follow the breadcrumbs. Allah puts a breadcrumb for you, just go pick that up and, take the next one. And every time I thought of quitting, I thought like, forget it, shut it down, stopped, I'll get some kind of a jolt, either through someone emailing me saying how much the work has transformed them, or, realizing that I feel more alive doing this work. As much as I enjoyed my work at the bank, for example, the Islamic Bank, and the people there were amazing, but I just was not in my element, right? I could feel more alive doing this work versus doing the work at the Islamic Bank. Even though the work was amazing, incredible, the pay was incredible, Mecca and Medina is nearby. I mean, I hit everything. It ticked all the boxes. But I was not aligned with what there's a hadith that says, like, work, all will be made easy, what you've been created for. So it's almost like there's something that you started, like you feel that like your whole body, mind, soul, heart is aligned. And it's really hard once you've tasted that to go back to something else. And that's where I find myself, basically.
Wow. And when you have that, I guess, that calling, then that's I guess, the underlying force that, makes you feel like you probably got to that point where I guess you're doing your content as normal. And then you saw, oh wait, there's quite a bit of demand here. It's growing and growing and growing. Then you thought, you know what, there is actually something in this. There's something I can really do in terms of inspiring people, in terms of changing mindsets, really having that impact. And I guess sometimes, like, I'm trying to think of from the perspective of someone that's probably hasn't started a job yet, or probably is thinking, okay, how do you get to that? I think there's a process, for you when you were at university, you would have never kind of perhaps foresaw this, like the growth and
never
the cause and, all of that. But it's like that process where you kind of got to go through those jobs. You got to kind of go for that grind. You got to kind of learn things about yourself. You got to kind of go and find yourself. And then as it kind of narrows down bit by bit, and with the right mindset, as you mentioned, I think it really does kind of lead you to find your purpose. And it is I guess, probably a test of patience, because, we are in an age where things come really fast. Things fast come, like deliveries, food. What we do is at the tip of our hands. But when it comes to careers, it doesn't come like that. It just doesn't work. You don't get your ideal job on a plate as soon as you leave college or university. You got to go out there, whether it's retail, whether it's, cleaning cars, whatever it is, to make a bit of income and start talking to people, start building soft skills and start, really finding who you are. There is a real process there. And I love kind of how you went through that process. You had setbacks. You had times where, you thought this wasn't going to work, but fundamentally, you stuck to it. You saw the positive impact of having the demand grew, and then you narrowed it down. That focus was to, at one point, this is where it's going to be, and this is what I'm going to work on. And alhamdulillah, this is how it works.
I mean, a couple of things on that, just on the note. The first thing is, I'm always very cautious of romanticizing the journey, because sometimes we can easily do that, right? You quit your job and follow your passion, and you could do whatever you want. It's a detriment of family, parents, children. Like, number one, I had a very, very supportive family. This is not a one-man show. The fact my wife, I was pregnant at that time. That time was one child. Now with 3 kids. We got my parents' blessings. My parents were, initially were very skeptical. You're living a very super duper comfortable next to Mecca Medina job to do what, right? And my in-laws as well. So getting that support has been incredible. And I feel like sometimes we underestimate. We feel like this lone wolf, sometimes someone who just against the odds and doesn't really own. I feel like it's important to put things in context. I don't romanticize the journey. I don't also make it sound like it was a single decision of a person who just did it on his own. There is a support network. Even my previous job, I mean, they did something which I never thought they would do, which is give me a 2-year leave without pay. I mean, just think about it. So I comfortably took that leap, because knowing I could always go back for 2 years, at least for 2 years. So that made a huge difference. So these things, and again, of course, above all of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of putting that, right, aligning everything, right? And some of the struggles I was going through, not just the financials and figuring out how I'm going to pay the bills and all the stress of that, but it's even things like, am I being ungrateful, right? Here I am in a perfect job, right? Islamic oriented, serving the ummah, next to Mecca Medina, good salary. There was nothing wrong with it. And here I'm saying I want to leave all of that to do something that's might sound risky. And I struggled with that question for a long time. And I talked to my mentor about this, and he was saying, Mohammed, it's the other way around. If you don't do Barakah Muslim, then you are being ungrateful for the ni'mah Allah is giving you. And I was like, oh, right? You're basically choosing the bank or the Islam because of the comfort, the security. You're not there to serve the mission, right? You're there for the comfort, security, the feeling, oh yeah, I'm here. He said even the Sahaba left Mecca, Medina and went out to different parts of the world to spread Islam, right? The work they did, that if Allah is created for that, and you feel like if you let that go, then that you're being ungrateful. And that just sealed the deal for me. That just sealed the deal. So I feel like, so that's the first point. That is like, it's a process and it's a network. And the second thing I want to mention as well is not to underestimate sometimes doing a job for the sake of being a job. Like I said, I cleaned windows. I worked in grocery stores. I worked as an interpreter. I worked as a part-time teacher. I worked as an assistant to a CEO. There's so many odd jobs that I've done that don't feel like, oh yes, I'll wait till my perfect job comes and then I'm gonna start. Like, and I've fortunately talked to a lot of unemployed young people, and they would say that, like, oh yeah, I'm overqualified. I'm like, just go out and do something, and then better than you asking people or even asking your parents. You need to start getting self-sufficient. So I feel like that's also another important point where along the process of finding that, inshallah ta'ala, what you've been created for, don't lose track of being responsible and do what you have to do, basically.
Yeah, that's definitely an amazing reminder there. And yes, the process, we look at things like maybe films like Rocky Balboa and stuff like that, where, there's a struggle. There's that hill to climb. But again, yeah, you're 100% right. it's not as glamorous as it seems at the end of the day. Like there are real times where you're really questioning yourself. You might be in a really kind of negative space where you're thinking, what have I done? And I think, I guess it's fine to be there. Like, I guess it's acknowledging that, it's not all going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be some bumps on the road, but really, I guess, grounding yourself to be prepared for that. And, family support networks, surrounding yourself with those kind of positive people, surrounding yourself, finding mentors, asking questions, doing your research, doing your homework. Because there's one thing, I guess, perhaps romanticizing an idea, but then if you're not really measuring the risks, if you're just taking that leap of faith and, you're not really for by it, then you're going to fall flat. So, there's going to be some homework and some thorough research to do. But you're right. It's a process. Never, I guess, and I guess, the thought that's come to me. Part of it is that kind of approaching things with, patience and humility. Really thinking that, okay, I have to be patient. I maybe I am overqualified right now. Maybe this is the case, but there's a process to go through, and perhaps Allah's testing me on this side of things, where if I'm patient and if I'm humble about this, if I just keep my head down and do what I need to do and gradually build up, then inshallah, with the tawakkul of Allah, if you have that faith in Him, it will come, inshallah. It will come.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that the equation that I use is there's an element about, Allah has given us a free will to think, to decide, to plan, to strategize, right? That free will is important, right? Make that decision. A lot of times people get so stressed out because they're not making even a decision. So decide what you want to do. And again, having mentors, doing shura, praying istikhara is important. And then the second part is what are called natural laws, meaning that you got to, if you try and start a business, you got to learn how to run a business. If you're trying to get into a career, you got to learn what it's like. If you're going to work in a restaurant, you got to learn how to cook. Don't expect miracles to happen just because you're smart or good, or just because you had an amazing degree. You got to follow the natural laws of learning, of development, of taking the reasons to become the best for yourself in that role. And then the third element is, and it's critical, is seeking Allah's permission. And I will say, I use the word permission because I feel like we forget this sort of master-slave relationship we have with Allah. We feel like, sometimes Allah forgive us, we almost have this transactional relationship. Oh, I'll do this, you do this for me kind of thing. Versus he's your master and you're the slave, right? And you're saying, well, Allah, is this good for me? And this is where istikhara comes in. This is where you're making dua, Allah, help me do this. Allah, I want, give me the permission. You ask Allah for permission. And then the outcome is not up to you. And so the outcome either can be positive, and if it's positive, you're thankful, or it can be negative, which means basically you have sabr and patience and persistence, or it can be catastrophic, right? Which is basically you end up in jail or you lose your family or something like that. And that's when you have that rida, contentment that, that this is also part of that trial. So it is difficult. But like you said, I felt like I never learned the true meaning of tawakkul until I started running my own business. I feel like when I was working full time, every month I get that morphine shot called salary. And then basically it was comfortable, versus when I did it full time, I realized, I wake up sometime middle of the month, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills, or I get a hospital bill, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay this. And I'm like, but then at that moment in time, having that yaqeen and tawakkul and saying something will come and Allah subhanahu will provide. And but I need to focus on why I'm doing this, focus on the intention, focus on the heart, focus on the free will, natural laws, and asking Allah subhanahu and acceptance. And that's that continuous process. It never ends. I don't say I'm there. It's just a continuous process, and I still get freaked out every month saying, how it's going to be. So it's still part of the process.
Yeah. And it's the kind of that thing as well, the contentment part where, perhaps one can try and put all the effort in and might think, why didn't it work out? But, sometimes it's that kind of principle, whatever is meant to be, it will happen for you. And if it wasn't meant to be, then alas, that's the destiny, I guess. But it's doing what you can, having that belief in Allah, and, being content with what the outcome is. The outcome isn't in our hands, like you kind of mentioned.
And also not taking that from a defeatist perspective. A lot of times we take, it's not meant to be, I'm going to sit back and just do nothing. No, if it's not, let's say you tried a strategy, you tried a business, failed, it's absorbing that and coming back, almost again. I would say, people say, when do you give up? I was like, I only give up when the door is completely shut in my face. I always mention Salahuddin Ayyubi. Salahuddin tried to enter Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken, 6-7 times. Some people say something said 20 times. So it was like, all right, we'll try it. It didn't work. Oh, I forget, guys. Let's go back and chill in Syria.
Yeah.
They actually went back to Jerusalem again and again. Because it could have said it's qadar, not meant to be for me to open Jerusalem. But no, they persisted. And I think that's sometimes we misunderstood and talk about in the book. We misinterpret sabr, misinterpreted persistence as a spiritual crutch, to just sit down back and do nothing.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point to reflect on. I guess let's kind of go back to the practical side of things. So I know you do kind of a lot of workshops and webinars, and you've probably been kind of doing it for a few years now. I guess one kind of practical question I have is, how do you keep individuals engaged in your kind of remote webinars? Like, because I think, especially considering the work climate right now, where perhaps young people are going to be, when they find their jobs, they'd be perhaps a lot more remote working. So they're going to be in more kind of remote meeting, maybe doing more remote presentations. So I think just from a practical perspective, do you have any particular practices that you do to keep the audience engaged?
Yeah. The first course is making sure you are clearly communicating the value of this workshop and saying, listen, this is what the value is about. So from the choosing a topic that's most interesting to them. And not just, let's do a webinar on how to work from home, right? So it's like choosing a topic that is really relevant to people. That's the first step. They'll be engaged. Number one is clearly communicating what they expect to learn. And then a few things, for example, I've seen my webinars, I always talk, I've been given this ability to be able to read the chat and talk at the same time. So I feel like apparently it's a rare skill. And I don't thought it was a rare skill because I see other people like, what? I can't keep track. I'm like, alhamdulillah gave me this idea. It's like I could read the chat, see what's going on, and sit down and talk on my slides. And that has helped to kind of people feel like it's a live thing. Also, I'm very pro being a live event versus recorded as much as possible. I feel like, we live in a world now, people are sick and tired of online recorded courses, and they want that live component. And then you bring your whole self, meaning bring your whole self spiritually, you see me, I'm standing, bring your whole self, like just come with your full attention, full personality, and just do the best you can. And think that you're serving and helping people to sort of learn and grow. And I've had webinars the last 2 hours and very few people drop off, and people are like, they feel engaged. Of course, another thing to do is try to, people are always looking for solutions there. No one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to become productive today. Like, that's not a top of mind thing, right? But someone can say, I want to become a better dad. I want to become a better mom. I'm sick and tired of working late. I want to come home and be home and have supper at 5, for example, right? So there's always a struggle. So you're trying to talk to those pain points, saying, I'm here to support you, to help you with that. Productivity is the answer to that, but I'm here to help you with this issue. So people realize this is not, it's not some, I'm not attending some theoretical course. It's just solving a problem that I personally have. I think that keeps people engaged.
Alhamdulillah. There's a concept of yours that I saw that I really want to get into, the Barakah culture versus the hustle culture. Tell us a bit about that, and how did that thought come about?
So after 10 years of doing Product Muslim, the team and I were reflecting on what does it mean, where we are at now. So we've been spending 10 years talking about spirituality and productivity. And we realized there's one concept that has been popping up, and this is concept of Barakah. And in 2017, when I was invited by this Chris Gillable, he runs an amazing tribe called the World Domination Summit, which it sounds more sinister than it is. Basically, it's just a group of entrepreneurs and authors, speakers talking about changing the world in a better way, in a good way. And he was that year. He was like, "Hey, I want to bring more diverse instructors. So why don't you come and tell us something from your work?" And I was trying to think, what is it I want to, if I were to summarize everything, what would I talk about? I ended up talking about Barakah. And alhamdulillah, like people really, really loved it. They call it the Barakah effect. And we had some great feedback. And then I thought, like, this idea of Barakah, we kind of hear it, we talk about it, we hear from our parents, grandparents, we always make dua with Barakah, but what is it really? And especially sometimes productivity, which is like more with less. And then again, one day I started thinking about, well, perhaps this is a way to describe this paradigm, this new paradigm of productivity, because there's two paradigms. There's one paradigm which is the hustle culture paradigm. The Gary Vee style, right? The whole gotta hustle, hustle, hustle. Hustling, you're a loser, right? Hustle harder, right? In fact, and then I noticed there's a backlash on that. Even like co-founder of Reddit, excuse this terms, used called hustling pornography, because people are like so obsessed with hustling, they hustle for the sake of hustling, and it's like became this thing. Versus, and then I was like, well, what's the alternative? If you're saying that's not the productivity or hustling or life that I want, then what is the alternative? And we came to this term Barakah culture, where yes, you still work hard. It's not Barakah sit back, relax, do nothing. You still work hard, but there's a different approach. And then when we started to sort of, sometimes we create opposites, you really start realize what you have, because you're like, if it's not egocentric, it must be God-centric. If it's not worldly focus, must be hereafter focus. If it's not about per success driven, must be about impact driven, right? It's about, if it's not about scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. Just to start really comparing and building this argument, and that's when this framework of Barakah culture came. And subhanAllah, it's been a couple of years since we sort of put that out there, and that consistently has been the people, with all, alhamdulillah, everything we've been blessed to do, but that has been one thing people have always found very useful. I mean, I had people come to me in tears. I mean, there was one lady who's a director of a major IT company. She was like, and she goes, I wake up 5 a.m. to, attend a conference call, and I could not wake up 5 o'clock in the morning to pray Fajr, right? She goes, I'm so hustle culture, right? I need to shift to Barakah culture. And so it gave people a framework to start realizing where they're at. So people who are already productive, who felt the productive, felt something is missing. And I call the missing, Barakah is that missing soul of productivity. So now we're in this weird, interesting thing. We're kind of just researching, just learning more, trying to collect stories, trying to read more, trying to kind of put a body of knowledge. What is Barakah? How do you tap into Barakah? What are those mindsets, vows, and rituals that track Barakah? And is there a way for us to practically bring it into someone's life so that you really feel that you're living this Barakah, lifestyle? And it feels like you feel productive and you feel full of Barakah. That's what we're trying to do with the work so far.
Yeah, that's it. Very powerful concept. I guess in terms of like the young person, when they're thinking about the future, the careers, one thing that kind of comes to mind, and I think maybe people can relate to this or maybe not, but for me, when I was at that kind of younger age, maybe 19, 20, I was thinking, okay, I want to get a job earning up to 50K. I want to live comfortably, get a nice car, get a nice house. And I guess that was it. But I think there is, even when I've done a lot of outreach work in my previous roles, and one of the things people ask a lot about is salary, and I guess that's important. It's not to dismiss that, but when it becomes the sole thing or the sole kind of purpose, and the kind of goal is just to have that kind of that material kind of life, and it's not applying to everyone, but I think there's a very common perception of careers is to get a good job, earn enough, loads of money, and live a good life. But I think the Barakah culture kind of changes that in a more deeper way, in terms of spiritual way. What are we thinking about in terms of what we want to do in our lives? But I guess, how do you think a young person could work towards having that kind of Barakah culture in their lives?
So a couple of thoughts. There's an article in the Atlantic which I recommend people to read. It's called Workism, and why work is making us miserable, right? And I think one of the interesting central ideas is that people in the modern age have placed work in the place of religion. If you think about it, people's sole purpose in life has become work. And that's why I'm a bit apprehensive of saying my work is my calling, because my purpose in life, because that technically it's not. Technically, I'm here to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My work is a means towards that. That's great. But it's not my calling, right? So I'm a bit sometimes, even though the work I'm in is kind of aligned, and that's why it's kind of self-fulfilling. But for many jobs out there, work today, it's not the same thing. So you got to be careful about. So we've made work our purpose, and almost like it became like people looking for transcendence, looking for meaning, looking for community for work. And you think about pressure associations, think about all these sort of associations. So the first chapter is to recognize your priorities and not make work the central piece of your identity. And that's why people who lose their jobs become very depressed, because it's almost like their identity, right, is taken away from them, versus it's a work and now I can find something else to do, right? So, and that's why it's a very interesting notion. I recommend people read the article. And the second thing is a lot of times we tend to compartmentalize our faith, spirituality. Even I'll say practicing Muslims. It's okay. There's work, and then there's spirituality, and then there's health, and then there's something else, right? And the question is, what I'm challenging with the Barakah culture is saying, no, this is integrated. From the moment you wake up until the moment you sleep, you are a slave, right? You don't choose when to be a slave. You don't choose when you're working hours for Allah. You are a slave from the moment, throughout your life. And that means everything about the slave is owned by the master. Everything about the slave is dictated by the master. And your role as a slave is to obey the master and be in line with what the master wants. So from what time you wake up, your thoughts, your emotions, your fear, decisions, interactions, and that includes a big chunk of it is our work. So I feel like that idea of fusing spirituality into everything you do, people feel very uncomfortable with that because we've kind of been taught is, spirituality is your salah, your fasting, your hajj, and, your hijab, and make sure you're a good person and don't say anything bad. But how do you fuse spirituality? And also in the modern workplace context, there's this is taboo, right? Because the last taboo, they call religious the last taboo in the workplace. And alhamdulillah, I'm working with some organizations like Religious Freedom Business Foundation and a few other organizations that are cross religion, like to fight corporations here in the US at least, to saying, no, you got to recognize, you recognize people of very different backgrounds, weird backgrounds. Like, why isn't it time for you to recognize that, faith is an important element of people's lives, and that's part of bringing the whole self to work. So that's where it was. So just recognize that you're entering work with your whole self, and you need to be comfortable that you can do that in the workplace. And if the workplace suppresses that, unfortunately, that can that's going to cause a lot of troubles. I do a lot of coaching, and a lot of times in people in their late 20s and early 30s, and people in that they have a successful career, they're top of their game, but they feel empty, or they feel unfulfilled, or they feel misaligned, or they feel like there's something's missing. And if you're at that beginning, you have that chance before you get too ingrained, before you get too, you get the sunk cost too high, right? You build a house, you have to pay that mortgage, right? You get all this like nice cars, like, oh, now I can't escape work. They're called the golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
You have the chance to break free from that, and that's why in a way sometimes I feel like when I left my work, if I delay a few more years, I probably would not have left my work because the golden the golden handcuffs would be much more severe, and be hard for you to break from. So these are things to think about, especially in the early years.
No, that is definitely some good advice there. Now, I want to go into some productivity practices. So when starting out, what productive practices did you start off with that you thought was making a big impact or a big change to your life and I guess trajectory where you were heading?
Big one is waking up early, right? The Barakah of the early hours. That hands down, that's what got me into this work. That's what helped me write the book while I was working full time for the bank. That still today is also the anchor. And to prioritize and really those early hours and prioritize. Not wake up early in the morning to exercise and do emails. No, you wake up in the morning to actually ground yourself in your purpose of life. So whether it's salah, whether it's istighfar, Quran, your adhkar, that morning routine needs to be almost like to the T, locked down. And if you're traveling, even if that morning routine is very critical. So I always tell people like focus on that first. I think it makes a huge difference. The second sort of major practice, I would say, it might sound weird, but actually my naps. That's like after naps are critical because they give me a second wind. Usually, if I don't nap by 2, 3, 4 p.m., I'm dead. Versus if I take a 20-minute nap, half an hour nap in the midday, I can power through till 5, 6 sometimes, and also be at my best with my family, with my children, with my spouse. So it's not like I'm just groggy and tired. I don't want to do anything with them. And those are kind of the second sort of practice. And the third practice I would say is being able to is planning without being attached to the plan. So meaning that I call set your intentions. All of my niyas work on this, right? So you put your day plan, weekly plan, month plan, whatever all the plans. But if things work your way, alhamdulillah. Things don't work your way, alhamdulillah. Like you're not attached and get so stressed out about it. But at least you have something to go with. And that's just part of tying your camel and putting your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, you mentioned sleep, and I think I picked up the whole sleep cycle thing from your book in terms of how it works. And alhamdulillah, I found an awesome routine for the winter in terms of because Fajr is later, And, when you wake up, you can wake up at, like, say, 6 o'clock and it's still dark. So you can still pray. You can have that kind of element of grounding yourself before you start in the day and get a lot of things done in the morning. I really 100% resonate with that. I've tried it. From your book, I saw it there and I thought, let me try it, and it made a big difference. But when it comes to summer, I just struggle in the summer. I don't know if you found this maybe when you're in the UK, but it's like when I was I'm trying to do my sleep cycle in the summer, because Fajr is about, let's say, starts at, say, around 3 o'clock, around June, or in summertime it's at 3-4 o'clock. I kind of really find it, when I go back to sleep after, getting back up early again, I find quite difficult. Would you advise, perhaps, where possible, changing that whole routine where maybe after Fajr staying awake and then maybe squeezing a nap in the afternoon somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, so the way I've done it in the past and here is like a couple of things. Number one, when I look at sleep cycles, a lot of time we also think of sleep cycles as sort of monophasic, one shot, 8 hours, right? And that really is a very recent phenomenon, and that was really to fit the factory model of 9 to 5 work and then supper, dinner, and then sleep for 8 hours. But historically, most places in the world were like biphasic. There were two major parts of sleep. One is at night, and one also in the midday, in the afternoon. And the fact that people complain, summer and winter. I will say that that's just rahmah. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changing seasons, and that's why I actually recommend people to change the routine every 3 months to spice up things. I'm not a machine. If I do the same routine for like a whole year, I'll probably be like, I'll lose it. So the fact that it's changing kind of makes you try different things and move with the seasons. But you want to do is think, what are my core habits that I'm not going to negotiate? For example, waking up half an hour before Fajr, for example, praying, doing tahajjud, praying, for example, Quran, adhkar, doing some writing, for example, or exercise in the morning. And then those are my core habits. Now, and then you can something shift around. For example, you might exercise in the winter, I exercise before Fajr. So when I can go to the gym, I used to go to the gym before Fajr and then go to Fajr, for example. Now in the summers, other way around. Of course, lockdowns, we do it more at home, but it's like, after a while. So you kind of spice things up a little bit. And there's a third thing to remember, and this is something that and with the whole Barakah culture research, I'm starting to really sort of explore this idea of, sometimes we've set ourselves to think that we have to sleep a certain number of hours. Otherwise, I cannot function. Right? You hear that? I cannot function if I don't have 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
Again, and yes, there was a lot of very powerful research about sleep and all that. But one of the interesting things we're exploring, and I'm doing this work with Dr. Bill Rothman and a few others who are really focusing on the Islamic cycle spiritual practices, the idea of what if the fact you sleep, say, 4 or 5 hours and get up and pray tahajjud, and that those tahajjud hours, literally the barakah of the tahajjud hour is as if you've slept those 2-3 hours, right? And recently they came across a study on, meditators. They bring this meditation expert who would meditate for like a couple of hours every day. And they found that those people meditate for 2 hours every day found that they need about 5 hours of sleep. And they function, everything else is normal. They function as if they have slept 8 hours. And imagine this is like on a just random sort of, secular type of research. And I'm like, it'd be amazing to start exploring. Like, we want to do an experiment where we run an example, 2 groups, one group sleep 8 hours, one group wakes up for 4 hours and gets tahajjud, and just measure, like, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, how they deal with the day. Yeah, exactly. It'll be fascinating, right? So I feel like sometimes we fit in a narrative, but we got 8 hours a day, and then we build our lifestyle around that narrative when we forget divine instructions to get up for tahajjud. Imagine, like, Allah's telling you get up and pray, it's good for you, and you're like, no, I need 8 hours of sleep. Can you just imagine? That's why I always say the slave master thing. The slave doesn't have to be comfortable. Sometimes the slave is not actually the more comfortable position, but that's part of the role. You got to sign up. The masters, and this time we have a master who has beautiful name attribute. He doesn't want harm for you. He knows best for you. So he's like, get up and pray. And we're like, but I need 8 hours of sleep now, right? And we become these like whiny servant slaves who are like, needs a good slapping sometimes. Get back to action. But yeah, those are some thoughts. Again, I know this might sound a little bit, people might think, whoa, what's this guy talking about? But I hope that people start realizing there's a paradigm here. That's why sometimes when you look at things from a barakah paradigm, tahajjud makes a lot of sense. But from a dunya hustle culture paradigm, tahajjud makes no sense. Like, what do you mean to get up 4 in the morning? You need 8 hours so you can, hit the hustle and grind next day. But when you look at it from Barakah paradigm, it makes a lot of sense. I think this is why I say it's a paradigm, because paradigm, instead of law in one paradigm, will not work in another paradigm.
Yeah, and I hope that really kind of sends home the message of routine, because I imagine, like, for example, in the morning I messaged my cousin to order me something on Amazon, and he woke up at like 2 o'clock. So he's sleeping deep, maybe 1, 2 o'clock a.m. and then waking up in the afternoon. And I think perhaps maybe there are quite a few people that have, because of kind of COVID-19, and because there's no university or college, or just generally, like, even working from home, you gradually wake up later because you just go downstairs and start getting your laptop and start working. But I think there is a good reminder there that we should be looking at ourselves in terms of how we sleep, how we view sleep, and even experimenting, because I think we've got that time right now to experiment. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can make mistakes, but if you're really knackered, you can go sleep again. But really experiment on that, and really, I think there definitely is something in there with the barakah. Allah calls us to pray, the Hajj, the last third of the night. There must be something behind it that we need to explore. 100%.
And experimenting, I would say stick with the experiment for at least 2 weeks. 3 days, 6 to 2 weeks. Sometimes when you transition to this experiment, be like, it's impossible. Like we do it when we have our retreats. We tell people to sort of experiment for a whole week, and then when they do the whole week, they're like, yeah, I can. By the first few days, like, oh, it's so hard and I can't do this. But then by then, like, you know what? It's not too bad. And actually, this is the best thing ever happened to me. There's one person said that, like, this is the first time my whole life I get up, I pray Tahajjud, pray Fajr, I do Adhkar, read Quran, I exercise, I have breakfast, I shower, I do some work, and it's not even 9 o'clock. She's like, that's incredible. She was like, that's right. It's like, how do you do that? So, and then when you experience it, like, okay, this stuff works. This stuff is real. And then think about this, think about also, they call it Barakah effect. It's like, this is I told the Muslim college, and this is your secret sauce, right? This is if you want an unfair advantage, right? Yeah. This is Barakah is the thing you need to tap into, and when you see Barakah, you like finally realize the power of it in your life.
Definitely, 100%. I'm conscious of the time, but there's 2 more concepts I kind of want to get into. One is, I guess, in terms of productivity, what do you think are the biggest drainers and negativity that maybe young people, or just generally, we should avoid? And how would that kind of tie into, because I've seen on your masterclass, the topic about managing your focus. So how would you kind of, I guess, tie in the drainers and negativity into managing your focus and driving yourself?
I mean, again, the biggest challenge I think we're facing in today's sort of world is distractions, right? And being addicted to our distractions. And the challenge also in the masterclass that these are harmless distractions. Like smoking is bad. Smoking drugs is bad. Pornography is bad. But checking your phone, it's not too bad, right? So it's an addiction, but it feels so harmless, feels so innocent. So suddenly you're like, well, should I, what's wrong? I'm just checking my phone every 10 seconds. Like, what's the big deal? And you'll realize that every time you take a stab at your focus, that you're not giving the muscle, the ability, your brain muscles and your heart muscles, I would say, the ability to think deeply about things, to focus on things, and to actually get something thoroughly done. I do an experiment in the masterclass, and people freak out when I do this. I tell them, check out your phones, and go to your social media apps and delete them. And it's almost like I asked them to kill their mother. They're like, no, like I can't. Like they literally can see panic, fear, gasps. I'm like, guys, I'm not asking you to deactivate your account. You can still have your account on your desktop. I'm just asking you just to remove it from your phone. And it's almost like the apprehension is unbelievable. It's like you're taking a piece of their soul away. And I'm like, wow. And they're like, guys, just pause. Now reflect. Look at yourselves. Reflect. And they're like, wow, this is how we react. Like, this is the visceral reaction we get by just deleting an app. I'm saying not even deactivating the account, just deleting an app from your phone. You can always go back and check it on the desktop. And that sort of sends the home like, okay, I need to work on this. So that's I guess the biggest drainer. And a lot of times comes down to, yes, there's a chemical version of this, and there's a brain neuroscience around addiction to social media. But then, of course, there's also that idea of our nafs want to be distracted, right? Because we don't want to deal with sometimes, our purpose here. And as shaitan, there's a saying that when the dinar and dirham was created, the first coins were minted ever in humanity, Iblis kind of took the dinar dirham, and then he kissed them and said, if whoever worships you will worship me, whoever abandons you will abandon me. And I feel like I think today Shaitan will take an iPhone for a kiss it and a smartphone, and so whoever worships you worships me, right? Because it's becoming this really, people are just like so in strange that world. So, and to start, and I know it's hard, and I know I'm not saying it's easy. What I recommend is at least have disconnect time, like you say, mornings. From the moment I open my eyes until, till let's say it's a couple hours. This is my safe zone. This is my not check my phone zone. After that, I'm happy to check my phone, no problem. But at least give yourself that buffer, and then do the same thing at night if you can. At least once you start tasting it, you might go hours and not check your phone and realize, oh, okay, it's not too bad. And then realize what potential sort of opportunities and growth and deep work. Everyone else around you is so distracted, and here you are, like really focused. I mean, you can get like a day's worth of work in like half a day, or less than that, and be amazed at how much progress you make in life if you just want to.
And I think there's a concept there about attention is the currency of time. So if your focus is constantly going left, right, and center, and you're being distracted by messages, notifications, wherever it is, then where's the quality of time gone? And sometimes I think to say it takes, when you're doing like a task, distracted, it takes, I think, I can't remember, I'll say up to 40, but I'm not gonna say an exact number, but they say it takes a while to get that attention back. And I think the phone, 100%, and especially social media, there's a lot of negativity, especially in, I guess, what they call Muslim Twitter or stuff like that, where you're constantly judged, you're constantly forced to these kind of these ideas, these notions that you got to be like this, your mindset's got to be like this. But imagine you could just whether it's using that digital well-being app on your phone to turn those notifications off, to grey out those apps, wherever it is, set timers, wherever it is, to reduce as much time as possible, and in the mornings to just not be dictated straight away by looking at your phone and responding to someone's message. Rather, you take the power, you do it on your terms. You go out and you think freely. You think, okay, I'm not going to be controlled by it, or I'm not going to be manipulated by the phone, or whatever it is. I'm going to focus on what's important, and I'm going to go ahead, put my head down, and just get on with it. And I've tested both, so I've been on both sides. But I've constantly looked at my phone in the mornings, every day, and straight my thoughts go into that. And I've done it where it's on airplane mode, so I'm not seeing any notifications. And alhamdulillah, it just feels much better. And there's even a process where you can, I guess, batch and process, where if you just maybe check your notifications twice a day, wherever it is, then you'll do it all in one go, get out of the way, get back on task, and bam, your attention, the quality of time is just gonna, I guess, increase tenfold. And I think that's definitely something, the phone, the social media, we need to kind of control what's going into our minds, because that stuff can really impact us.
There was this one hadith that I think that really helped me straighten me up with this stuff. It says, "Man asbaha hamhu dunya." Whoever wakes up and his worry is dunya, جعل الله فقر بين عينيه. Allah will make poverty between his eyes. وشتت الله الأمر. Allah will disperse matters for him, right? And I feel like that's it. Wake up, the first thing you do is check your phone. Boom! It's like you panic, you see the poverty, scarcity, you start, your mind go all over the place, and you destroy it, right? And then, man asbaha hamhu al-akhir. Whoever wakes up and his main worry is akhirah. How do you prove that? When you wake up, you do adhkar, you do wudu, you pray tahajjud, you pray fajr, you read Quran, you do tasbih, you do salawat, do all the stuff that's important to you, that helps you in akhirah. That shows that that's your main concern, because that's the first thing you do. And then Allah says, Jama' Allah ali amr. Allah will gather matters for him. And he, to a point, says he'll bring the dunya to his feet, right? So like everything becomes gathered, everything becomes cohesive, collected. So I remember reading the hadith, I was like, man, like which one do you want to be? And every day you choose, right? Every day you choose. So it's that one decision that can make a huge difference, is this one. And also I want to be clear, sometimes we try to blame, it's because technology, social media, but because we love to be distracted. It is fun to be distracted. We want to be distracted. We love it when our friends message us and send some nice funny memes and GIFs and videos. We love that surprise element of social media. So it's not the technology. Yes, it enables it, but it's actually our own addiction. So think of yourself, blame yourself, and don't just blame the technology that you have in your hands.
No, definitely. And no, that's some good words there. And I think, we really need to, and I think there's positivity, in everything. like in social media, in the phone. There's good stuff there, but like you mentioned, it's really just trying to manage that element of it. And I guess it's conscious of the time. Last pieces of advice, for the young person who's thinking about the next steps, or is thinking about before their career, thinking about what they want to do, and kind of I guess that advice and thinking about how does that lead to defining success and defining your best self. What would you say about that?
I think the key things to focus on, and this is advice I got before we started or in early stage Product Muslim, is from Sheikh Abdul bin Bayy. He said he went to his house in Jeddah, and I remember he was, me and a friend were asking for advice, and he said, أحسن وأعمل, have sincere intentions, have good intentions, and work hard. And I feel like that motto, if you keep that motto in mind, do I have good intentions? And I'm willing to, and am I willing to put the work in, right? Am I willing to show up, not distracted, really focused, getting things done, moving things forward with the good intentions in mind. I feel like if we can just follow that motto, the outcome is, we need that's not who you are. How life deals with you, that's not how you define success. Success in Islamic terminology, I'll use the word tawfiq, right? Tawfiq is what? Tawfiq is when you align yourself and you align your will with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You align your will with what Allah wants, how Allah wants you to live your life. That's true success. That's tawfiq. And that is embodied in the life of Rasulullah. That's embodied in the lifestyle of Rasulullah. So it's a matter of how do you every day emulate the Prophet in your conduct, emulate him in the way you sort of carry yourself, emulate the way you work, and the way you sweat, and the way you deal with people. Just really pushing yourself. And I feel sincerity, hard work, and that prophetic example. If you keep that with those three things in mind, inshallah Allah opens doors beyond your imagination and it gives you barakah. Even though people are outside saying, he's not earning that 6-figure salary, but there's barakah in that, in your income, barakah in your business, that you feel content, happy, and feel like you're making progress towards Allah in a way that's meaningful and purposeful. And that in the end is what matters the most, inshallah.
Yeah. And I think this is summarized in the Barakah manifesto, if I'm correct.
Yes, inshallah. Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to share that. If you're fine with that, I definitely want to share that on the screen, and make sure people access that, because there's that manifesto summarize it so well. I believe in 100 words from the picture I saw.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
And and I think like to kind of end off with, we've covered so many different topics, but fundamentally thinking about that Barakah culture and that Barakah manifesto, if young people can really think about how they can embed that in their lives. And I've kind of seen it for myself to an extent. I'm not going to claim that, I'm 100% Barakah culture. Of course, nobody's perfect. But I've seen how changing certain things really does change the trajectory. And I look at where I was a few years ago, and I look at where I am now, where I have the confidence to, be talking to someone like yourself who's written the book that I was reading before, that kind of helped me, with starting out on the journey. But if you asked me back then, would you ever approach Mohammed Faris for a podcast? Would you ever be in a podcast? Would you ever talk in front of a screen? And I'd be like, no, and definitely not, like 100% not. But so when you set certain things and just change that trajectory to, I guess the right intention, for the sake of Allah, and really embedding that in, then, like you mentioned, that the success
things open
overcome,
up. Things open up.
Yeah.
We call it, sometimes I call it it's like the untying the knots, right? It's almost like you have how, like I remember when I was before making the transition, like how on earth I'll do this full time? Like it just did not make, like getting out of this and get out of debt. There's all these knots, some of them real, legal issues even have to go. It's like, how am I going to do this all? But it's almost like, you put the intention, you put the hard work, you follow the process. It's like everything just Allah removes his knots. You're like, okay, I guess I'm doing this, right? And I feel like that's exactly how it feels like. Where it's like that story of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling Ibrahim alayhi salam, call people to Hajj. It's like, I'm in the middle of the desert. How am I supposed to call all mankind to Hajj? It's like, you do the call. We'll take care of we'll take care of delivering your message. And I feel in a way sometimes we need to, the Barakah culture, upon us is to live those mindsets, vows, rituals. Upon us to make those decisions. The outcome, the barakah, coming, that's not up to us. We just have to do our part, inshallah.
Yeah, and when you leave that faith, with Allah, then in that tawakkul, you can't go wrong. Whatever happens, you can't go wrong. And fundamentally, when it comes down to the main thing, we are working for the akhirah. Our main life, our best life is the next life. And this is a means and a test, towards that. But I will end with that point. But Jazakallah khair, I really appreciate you joining and having this amazing conversation. And I really hope the listeners benefit. And, if there's any kind of thoughts or reflections, please do kind of share in the comments for those that are listening. But, with that, Assalamu alaikum. I'll end the recording now.
جزاك الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.